Bulavanaka, Talafalava, Kia ora, Kia orana, Lei, aloha, and good evening. It's a tremendous pleasure. I can't say how great a pleasure it is to see one of our most wonderful graduates here with us tonight, Salote Kaimacuata, all the way from Fiji, and her daughter Tala has come with us. Ms. Salote graduated from the University of Otago in 1986 and was admitted as a barrister and solicitor of the High Court of New Zealand in 1987. Then she had a moment of wisdom and said, I'm not going to be a lawyer. So she went to the College of Education and graduated, majoring in outdoor education, and she wanted to, sports education, because she wanted to work with children. And she taught at Rosedale Intermediate in Otago. God, you really go to the warm places in Dunedin, don't you?
I was heading to Stewart Island.
Stewart Island, before returning to Fiji in 1992 as State Counsel for the Director of Public Prosecutions Office. So she went and became a school teacher, which I think is the most important profession of all. We're about the 15th most important profession, but school teaching is right up the top. And it doesn't surprise me that you would do that. You would have been the most wonderful school teacher, I'd imagine, too, Salote. From 1995 to 1997, Salote worked as a legal aid advisor, and in 1997 joined private practice at VJ Nadu and Associates, being appointed a magistrate in 1999. And I'm so proud of you, and I met you when you were a magistrate over there. Salote resigned from this role in 2008 following Fiji's fourth military coup and personal challenges with the rule of law issues, and was appointed Child Protection Specialist, UNICEF Pacific, the same year, which you remains to this date. So you're now working in the international realm. In 2011, Salote obtained an MBA from the University of the South Pacific, and we're enrolling you in a PhD before you leave here, and you'll get that done as well. We're very honoured, Salote, that you and your daughter Tala have travelled all this way to visit us, and you are talking on the most important topic, children. Salote is going to address us tonight on Pacific small island states' child protection systems need sound legal frameworks to better protect our children from violence, abuse and exploitation. Please give Salote, and before I finish, I'll give you a big welcome, but I forgot to welcome two important guests here. Firstly, we have Professor Hannah Nicholson, who is the Director of External, Vice Chancellor of External Relations, and does a fantastic job throughout the world, including the Pacific, and Nina, who you all know, who is absolutely incredibly brilliant at her job and bringing all the Pacific students and the non-Pacific students that I feel like when I'm with you, Nina. You make me feel I'm in the Pacific every time I see you. So I just want to acknowledge your presence here tonight, and I know that you've met both of these people. So please give Salote a great warm welcome.
It is on? Okay.
You want to stand here or
it's okay. Thank you. Well, Bulavanaka, Talofalava, Maloelele, Namaste, and Dhanyavad. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I forget I'm getting older and I sometimes need to take my glasses off and put it on, so excuse me. I'm rather nervous because I haven't been here for a long, long time. And I was just telling a colleague, that was my favorite seat at the back there, especially on a wintry morning when you had to come to tax law at 8 a.m. I want to acknowledge you again, Professor Mark Hannigan. If it hadn't been for Professor Hannigan, I would have dropped out of law school about year 2, and I had said that earlier. It was freezing cold. I missed my taro, cassava, and fresh fish. It was difficult blowing smoke in a flat where you're a poor student, sitting in your sleeping bag while studying. But because of encouraging words from Professor Hannigan, who always made time to ask, how are you going? Stay on it, and gave us fun stories in family law that made me think it's not too bad. So I will finish because I wasn't happy with the way women were treated at that time in family law. So here I am. Can I ask who's in charge of the PowerPoint? You are? Yeah. Or can I just do it myself? Down here? Okay, I'll do it. Is it this one?
Yep, I can go for you. So just tell me.
It's okay. Do you have a clicker? Thanks. I thought I'll just introduce you. Tale is here. My daughter is sitting at the back there. Tale means precious. I have only one daughter. I have a son who's older. He doesn't want to ever leave Fiji, which is typical of our Fijian men, unless they're playing rugby. So, thank you. So it was only my daughter I was able to persuade to join me. Very briefly, if I can just say, this is the second program cycle of child protection. It's very new in the Pacific. When I was approached by UNICEF, I said yes, I'd have a go, try something different, and was appointed child protection specialist. So the first team are the ones at the top left-hand corner. My first boss, that's what we call them in Fiji, Chief of Child Protection was a Swedish lady, Johanna Eriksson. You'll see the Australian Youth Ambassadors there. They came in to give us extra hands for when we did the baseline in Fiji on child protection. And we're still trying to finish the 14 countries altogether. I'll show you those countries. To the right was my second boss. She's Australian. She's now in Indonesia. And currently, and that's the team, you'll see some familiar faces, or the same faces in all three photos. Those are the Pacific Island national staff. We have international staff coming always. They stay a 3-year term or 4-year term. Some stay 5 years because they love the Pacific. And I'm trying to encourage you to explore. Come to the Pacific and help us with child protection. You're closer to us, and I think you're Pacific too, although sometimes New Zealand and Australia get left out when we say Pacific. So at the bottom, we have Kiribati. We have 2 international staff. Setasak is Thai. Amy, who's in the middle, is American. And the other international is our chief, Brigitte, who's French. I thought I'd give you the background on child protection systems needing sound legal frameworks in the Pacific. We in the Pacific, 3 of our countries, Papua New Guinea is not part of UNICEF Pacific because they're so huge. They have a standalone UNICEF office. But Vanuatu and Kiribati are in the top 5 of the countries that experience violence against their children. So there's a lot of work to be done in the Pacific. Sorry, I just put I put child protection and Pacific and children in a picture form, and it just throws up all the keywords, and I thought it's always important to put mum, dad, and the children together, because children, their hero are their dads, and their heroine are their mums, be they together or separate. So, sorry, New Zealand is not there, but for a lot of people who don't know where Fiji is, because when they send things to the Solomon Islands, it's usually Honiara, Solomon Islands, Suva. They don't know that we're actually 14 separate, independent, sovereign states. And often they ask us when we're doing some work on proposals like birth registration, how many motorbikes do you need to get to the other parts of the country? I say we need aeroplanes and ships, not motorbikes. So the ones with the flags, apart from Papua New Guinea, are the 14 countries that we cover in the Pacific. Our operational cost is the most expensive for UNICEF Pacific. But often when they ask, where's Fiji, or where's Palau, or where's Vanuatu, we say, do you know where Australia is? Yes. Do you know where New Zealand is? Yes. So look around a little bit at the top there. We're somewhere under the ocean, usually, because we're usually a dot. Child protection strategy is a tiered approach, and we focus on Vanuatu, Kiribati, and Solomon Islands because their social indicators are the lowest. But even then, the North Pacific countries, Palau, Micronesia, and Iramai, are also challenged. When I first went there, and I've only been twice because it costs the office almost $15,000 to send me there to do some work. You spend that money and you do as much as you can because you don't know when you can go back again. So there's a lot of support from the states in the North Pacific for Aramai, Palau, and Micronesia. Anyone here from North Pacific? Just checking. When I went there and I heard American accent, I just expected a certain sophistication with systems, with service provisions, service response, and laws. But no, I was disappointed that our main government partner, Ministry of Internal Affairs, and their birth registration system is very fragmented. So it's really difficult to capture data to better assist how you can inform policy, laws, and management decisions. Please interrupt me if you have any questions in between. So according to the Global Child Protection Program strategy, we work on the protective environment approach. The legal, regulatory, and policy systems really gives you the framework to guide your judges, magistrates, your lawyers, your police, your social workers, your teachers in schools, to ensure that as duty bearers, they're looking out for the children that they're responding to, be they in the courts, usually victims, witnesses, and or offenders. Can anyone tell me why I say and or offenders? Your lawyers, yes. And or is very important. Anyone? And don't worry, I failed a couple of law papers. But the important thing is finishing it. Children as offenders also need that special protection because they still need help to navigate around the systems, the laws, and the services that they should be accessing, can access, and don't know that is there. Child protection baseline research, we've done up to 9, and we've still got another 6 countries, 6, is my maths right? 9, 5 countries to go. Cook Islands, Niue, Tokelau, Tuvalu. I'm missing one, Niue. So Niue, Tokelau, Cook Islands, correct me if I'm wrong. We usually assume that New Zealand has a lot bigger presence there, and we will do a lot more there. So we've kind of left them till last. And a lot of the New Zealand laws govern the children in Niue and Cook Islands, and also Tokelau. Tokelau is the other country. So we use evidence also to try and persuade decision makers and advocate for change to ensure that children are better protected in schools, at home, in the community, and also with the justice system when they respond to children. You might have heard in the Pacific, a favorite saying is, children are heard, are seen, and not heard. And the way I was brought up, you watch, you learn, and you don't speak. And the way we were disciplined, if I did something wrong in a gathering, my grandmother or my aunt would pinch me really fiercely, but I'm not allowed to scream or show any reaction, but she's telling me a message, I did something wrong, and I have to find out later. Yes? That's pretty harmful, isn't it? Somehow it worked, because I got here and I finished law school. I'll just go through, those are our key result focus areas. Child protection systems, including justice and police, child and family social services, education communities, to help them provide improved quality of access to services for the prevention of response to violence, abuse, and exploitation of all children and at all times. Those are basically, in a nutshell, your laws, regulations, your policies, and your service response systems. And at all times, cyclone season is about to start, so we always need to be ready and prepared to continue with our normal work, to improve our laws, to strengthen our policies, to build our service response systems. And when a hurricane or cyclone happens, like in Vanuatu in 2015, and Fiji in 2016, and Samoa, I think you remember 2009, was an awfully bad one. We still need to continue with the normal work and also respond at the same time. And child protection is even a bigger issue and is more aggravated, and children are put more at risk because there's shared evacuation shelters, there's a lack of services, and unfortunately the focus is on food, shelter, water. So we had to fight really hard in both Tuvalu, both in Vanuatu, to ask the Director, Ministry of Justice, who have the mandate for children, please have your court sitting. Please get the police to investigate and bring the cases to court. You don't need a building. You only need the application of the law. And I've done it under the coconut tree in community courts in Fiji. So it's about the principles, the approach, and applying the law. Fancy buildings are a luxury for us. We've sat out on the beach and also done justice. And even from a helicopter, when the accused was trying to run away, they had to summon him back to the beachfront to say, stop, we'll do the court sitting right here before you run away again. And those, I'm just sharing the challenges in the Pacific. You got to be ready to do whatever you can do to mete out justice. Our second focus area is working with parents, caregivers, children to demonstrate skills, knowledge, and behaviors of an enabling environment to allow children in our communities to grow up to realize their full potential, to become lawyers, to become teachers, or to become the best parents they can be. And to enable the children to be increasingly free from violence, abuse, and exploitation. As I said earlier, the way our parents, or the way I was brought up, you got pinched, you got smacked in the open in front of everybody. And the rationale was, we love you and we're disciplining you, we're teaching you a lesson. I remember as a 7-year-old, I said to my mind, just tell me what I did wrong and I won't do it again. Do you think I opened my mouth and said that to my parents? Did I? Why didn't I? A bigger smack, and I still had to go to school with welt marks on my legs. My daughter will tell you that she insisted that I take her to the police station for her to report me to the police officer when I actually gave her the first smack, and I was shocked. Your head tells you what to do, knows what to do, but I had seen this picture for 30 years because I had Tale when I was about, I think, 33. And at 35, she was a very adventurous child, and that's when I smacked her. When you see this picture, your knowledge is this, but your practice is the picture you've seen this long, and that's what you do. So it's about mind and applying it. And that's about the laws and having the enabling laws to help parents, help teachers, help police officers and duty bearers to make sure that children are free from harm. I'll just read through this. Our general forms of assault are prohibited. Our corporal punishment in the home is permitted and across the region in the Pacific. In contrast, corporal punishment in schools are prohibited everywhere except Solomon Islands and Niue. How do you think the laws are working in the Pacific? The laws are the easiest part to draft, to consult, and to put together. And it looks really great in those law books. The application is the challenging one. And we continuously have that challenge in the Pacific. We also have data that evidences that the practice of corporal punishment, of assaults, of violence, of beatings, bad words, continue despite our perfect laws. And over 70% of Pacific Island countries have child protection legislation, usually in their penal code or their criminal procedure code, but never, hardly any as a standalone law. And also within our civil codes for family court, for family law, and more than half of them have family protection or domestic violence legislation. We started first with advocating and trying to push for child protection laws in the Pacific. However, the women's group surpassed it and sped past us and enacted a lot more domestic violence legislation in the Pacific countries. We call it family protection. It was a strategy to make sure that our predominantly male-dominated parliamentarians and cabinets wouldn't feel too badly or think too harshly that it's not just about women, it's about the family. And it is about the Family Protection Act and addressing domestic violence. However, we also had to push and ask if we could input so that children are not an afterthought in domestic violence cases. In the Pacific, the rationale for us pushing for children to also be included in the Family Protection Act was the delay and the slowness in persuading the decision makers to enact the child protection bills that were waiting. Fiji, we've had about 4 pieces waiting since 2012. We're pushing again, and we're hoping that by the end of 2017, the adoption bill, the child protection, children in need of protection, and children in conflict with the law will be passed by the end of the year. The community-based corrections, I'll say Fiji, was easier to go through. My Fiji colleagues, this stays in the room. Fiji, we've had several coups, and we have this program of called the Yellow Ribbon, and we call it the revolving door at the prison, where certain people have privileges and they walk in one day and they're out again the next day, even though there's a 2-year imprisonment term given them. However, the rationale for the community corrections bill was really to address youth in conflict with the law, or young people under 18 who are in conflict with the law, so that they didn't have to go into prison. But it's been turned around by the decision makers to use it for the Yellow Ribbon program for the bigger youth who go in. My offer stands. Please interrupt me and ask a question if you need to. Violence against children and women is a commonplace in the Pacific, and just under half of the students aged 13 to 15 surveyed across 11 Pacific countries experienced bullying within the previous last 12 months. That was 2015, sorry, in 2015. That was conducted by WHO through the schools to find out health of young people in terms of bullying. A similar percentage of women in 11 PICs, or Pacific Island countries, experience a lifetime intimate partner violence, with 17% experiencing sexual abuse below the age of 15. When that survey was done, the strategy was, it's a health survey, so that women could be allowed by their partners to participate. So if it's a health survey, it's not really, it's a worthwhile thing. I'm just letting you know the challenges where you have to couch and use the right words or the most appropriate words so that you can get the response and participation that is required. Our legislation gaps include unacceptably low minimum ages of marriage, which are lower for girls than for boys in 8 of our countries in the Pacific, and the gaps exist in child labor and exploitation legislation. I think it's Tonga who allows marriage at 15, and at Fiji we've had some marriages at 12, 14. Religious marriages, and the CRC committee in Geneva actually made a specific comment about the concern where in Fiji we're still practicing religious marriages, particularly with the Indian communities where they still have some arranged marriages. And I have to I have to share with you a particular case where I was taken to task. Very poor family. Parents came along. They were charged for marrying their child under 16, because you can marry your daughter when they turn 16 under that law, which just changed 2 years ago. But with the consent of mom and dad, you can marry them. But she had married, or they had married their daughter at 14. I spoke to the young woman. She was very proud of what she'd learned from her mother. She was a great wife. She loved her husband. She turned out, she looked like a 21-year-old, very mature. But the law says that she was still too young to marry. What do? I was taken to task by all the women's groups. I was taken to task by social welfare for not putting the parents in prison for actually breaking the law. Now, do you think it would have helped their daughter for their parents to be in prison? She was still only, she had just been married at 14. And I was just sharing with Professor Hannigan, I think the one good thing about going to law school is it teaches you to be confident, to take the risks, and to argue your way through difficult situations where you don't break the law, but like a coconut tree, you bend it a little bit. But you have to substantiate and evidence why you've taken that unusual step.
So in that case, could she continue being married? Did she have to annul the marriage, or could she continue being married, or what happened to their marriage?
Well, none of them took the case to court, both the husband and her, because it's a religious marriage. She has no legal protection because it's not legal, but no one except the police, someone complained, so the parents were charged, yes. But I was not going to put the parents, yes. And they basically said, we're too poor, we cannot feed her anymore, we cannot put them through school. We've skilled them and we've taught them all the skills that they need to be able to do well the best way we can in life. Neither of them went as far as, I think, year 6 in primary school. They were farmers, very poor. Even our government was not reaching them.
How old was the husband?
She was 14, he was 18.
Is it, can it be an abuse case then?
Beg your pardon?
Why isn't the onus put on the male since he's older?
Good question. Well, he told me he loved the girl. It was an arranged marriage, and that's their tradition. And it worked for them. Well, that is my assessment because it went on for a while. It's a really difficult one where I felt I was playing God, and I'm not God because I can't see into the future, but I could only work with the information that was put before me, and also with talking with the parents and talking separately to the young lady and talking separately to her husband in the religious marriage. So it's a very difficult one. And I was not a very popular magistrate, but I knew I was popular amongst the public because I shared with you that those that are put in prison would come up and still say hello to me on the street when they came out. My daughter said to me, "Mom, you must have done something right." I said, "Well, I address them as sir because they're important. There's somebody's son, there's somebody's husband, there's somebody's child or grandchild, and I have to respect them. You have to love the person, not the deed." And especially for young people, I don't know young men, but at 15, 16, it's a wonderful, adventurous time. And I flattered here in New Zealand with people who love to make home brew. But you wouldn't believe I was really boring. I never drank. I tried some things, like sambuca, but I never drank. I never drank because it gave me headaches and it wasn't worth the trouble. But I always made sure my friends got home safely. I was always the designated driver with an OJ drink at the pub. Yeah. So just going back to child marriages, it still happens in the Pacific, in Vanuatu, and in Solomon Islands. They're given as compensation. There was a case where a mother and a son were run over by someone, and the compensation read as several pigs, mats, yams, and the last compensation, what do you think it was? One gal. It's spelled G-A-L. Unfortunately for that particular province, the judge happened to be Fijian, who was our former Chief Justice. He looked at the case. He ordered, take the girl off the list. She is not going to be given as part of the compensation. I was really excited when he did that. And I asked, was it in the paper? No. How come your chief registrar didn't have it put in the paper? It's an opportunity to raise awareness. No. Which province is he from? Happened to be that province that he had tried to change the list for. So I don't think he was too pleased that someone was trying to change their traditional customary system, although he works as a chief registrar for the courts. So the law is here, but the traditional practice or social norms is here. So we have challenges in terms of reconciling the two. So girls are still given as compensation. And my question was, but a young boy died. How come a young boy wasn't given to the other family? No, it's not the boys that go across and are married off. It's the girls that are married off. And the rationale is to maintain community relationships. It's not about the victim. It's about continuing good relationships amongst the community. And that's our challenge in the Pacific. We're very communal. So laws need to also be looking at how to change our social norms to ensure that victims are also provided for. Because if I'm raped, I don't even get asked anything. It's my father, it's my uncle, it's the chiefs who make the decision on what is to happen. Despite the fact that our laws are trying to move this way, we're still also being challenged with the other traditional customary practices, which are covered in the constitutions in Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and also Fiji. And our criminal age and our minimum age for criminal responsibility are also well below the absolute minimum age, which is 12, recommended by the CRC committee. In Cook Islands, Palau, Samoa, they can age out if the child justice system, if the child presents in the child justice system at 16. It used to happen in Fiji, but everything changed 4 years ago when they needed all our young students to become 18 and vote. The voting age used to be 21. It's all changed now to 18. I'm glad for the young people, because at one stage, well, interestingly enough, and Erica, I think I shared this with you, under our Adoption Act, which it hasn't changed yet because it's still in the process, infants are defined as up to 21. So anyone who wants to adopt their Fijian niece or nephew, you better rush before they change, if they haven't reached 21. But that's the only one that never changed. You could drink, you could marry, you could drive, and you're an adult at 18, and you could vote. So that happened 4 years ago. Our informal justice mechanism are practiced in all our Pacific countries and pose, like I had mentioned earlier, a great risk, particularly to child victims who may be encouraged to reconcile without even being consulted. And interesting enough, it's not only girls this time, boys are presenting, but our young boys in Fiji are still, or in the Pacific, they still don't complain if anything has happened to them because they're still trying to be brave, not complain and be the strong, small man that they think they should be, because that's the examples they see around them. I'll just very quickly demonstrate. Under our, when we did the baseline, and I'm just demonstrating Fiji, Solomons, Kiribati, and Vanuatu, our compliance with the indicators, there were 230 indicators of the ideal protection, child protection legal systems. As you can see, our compliance is green, and partial compliance is yellow, and our non-compliance is very high in red. And it's a similar picture for, it's worse actually for our social welfare system. Funnily enough, we all inherited the British system. Fiji still has the social welfare system that we inherited from the British system. We're struggling right now to find the right fit for a social welfare response system for children. Because our social workers under the law actually have the authority to go and remove a child. But what do you think happens on the ground when they go to family homes or the community? The community, the traditional customs kick in. And it's really difficult, even though they've taken their oath to do their work by the law, to actually comply with the law. So there's a struggle there with the fact that we can't reconcile two parallel systems. One is written, the other one isn't, in terms of our tradition and customs. So children are put more at risk if harm is happening, and they're hesitant to remove the child so that they can work with the perpetrators or the suspects in the case of child abuse. And despite the wonderful ads that you see on TV about Fiji being a wonderful paradise, we still live communally, extended families, and the risks are higher for our children. It's not only Fiji, it's also Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and the other Pacific Island countries. So our struggle is basically to bring everything up to the green level and reduce the bars in the red. I've just given a snapshot. I'm sorry, it doesn't look so good. It's a legislative prohibition of violence against children in our domestic laws, and it's just a summary. Don't know if you've heard this for a while. Melanesia, Polynesia, Micronesia. Are you familiar with those? Yes? The Melanesian countries, for some reason, we still remain high in the top 5. It's Papua New Guinea, and Kiribati, Micronesia. But Vanuatu and Solomon Islands and Fiji follow quite close behind in terms of our flouting the law regards prohibition of violence against children. So for child protection law, Vanuatu, since we started in 2008, they haven't really shown children as a priority yet for child protection. And I was disappointed because sorcery was more important than children at the time. We kept advocating. In Tokelau, we just haven't reached, and Tonga. Tonga has threatened to de-ratify and to reverse the CRC, so we're very careful and very sensitive and listening very carefully to how we can work with Tonga to stay on track, because also their first initial report to the CRC committee is 30 years overdue, And despite the fact we tell them that's norm in the Pacific, because the others were 20 and 25, there's still a lot of hard work there. Our family protection law, I told you, sped past and did really good work. And protection from violence in general law, Fiji, FSM, and Palau, they're advancing really quickly in those areas. But it's the implementation of those legislation and the enforcement of those legislation that is the most challenging. And corporal punishment, except for Solomon Islands, Solomon Islands, I forget the second, anyway, corporal punishment has been banned in all schools, but it's still being practiced. So, no questions there? I still think being a teacher is the best profession, though I love being a lawyer because it helps you argue your way through everything. But after doing Teachers College in New Zealand and going back to Fiji, it was really difficult working with a system that didn't see the value of where New Zealand was in terms of advancing and helping have the children realize their full potential. I loved it here when the children asked questions and that they challenged you. They couldn't pronounce Kaimacuata, so I was Miss K. But Miss K, that is wrong. Miss K, that is wrong. Okay, so how is it wrong? Then they'll explain. I love that. In Fiji, if you challenge a teacher, you're in trouble. When really, children are totally just curious, they're innocent, and they want to help, and they're pointing out that you're wrong. And there's no agenda there. But unfortunately, in Fiji, it doesn't quite happen like that. Or in the other Pacific countries, it doesn't happen like that either. When we did the baseline, a lot of parents admitted that they were smacking, hitting, kicking, and pinching their children. And the results showed when the children were asked that the results were actually higher. In all the countries we went and did the survey in, all parents admitted that they were hitting, kicking, pinching, or smacking their children, or labeling them. But consistently, the children said it was a lot higher than that. And in this one, percentage of parents reporting any violent discipline against children in the household within the past month shows, and this is Vanuatu only, Kiribati, Samoa, Fiji, and Solomon Islands. Can you read it from the back? Any questions there? The children were asked. It was usually done in a group work, in a classroom, or you took them out somewhere else, and you'd work with them and basically have them tell you their stories and counted the number of stories. We just came back from Cook Islands, where their 5-year-olds were also asked very simply. They were given balloons, and they were asked to write down 3 important things in their life that they really liked and they would like to see an improvement in. Those were basically the modems or modalities that we used. It was really through play. And as you know, some of you might know, children learn through play. And that's why it was wonderful to major in sports, because you never have any problem with managing children because they just love play. So you center your questions and everything around play, like using balloons, and you ask the questions, you can get them to write it down or to draw or to just tell stories amongst themselves, and you capture that in the survey. For the ones that we just did recently in Cook Islands, it was really interesting, 5-year-olds. For their child protection policy draft, hasn't been finalized. What are the 3 most important things for you as a 5-year-old? A job, God, Mum and Dad, and others. There was a cute little boy who said, playground, playground, playground. Others who said, my friends, my family, and school. And then we asked them, what are the three most important things in your life that you wish, that you do not like, sorry. I thought it was interesting. Consistently, a few of them said, big people who are married, who fight. And I thought, interesting. They're 5-year-olds, they're already aware. And bullying came out quite a bit, and fighting. That was my first time in Cook Islands, and I was just really surprised because it's a beautiful country, it's paradise. And the children were articulating things that I couldn't see, but that they were experiencing, because it was written on their balloons, and it was written on the papers that they were responding in. So I learned a lot, again, being reminded that it's not what you tell your children, but it's what you do that they watch and they pick up. Just in case you want to be a parent. Talk less, act more. Children will remember you always for all the positive things. During our baseline, we also found out that all the places where we thought children would be safest were the most not so safe places in the home, the schools, and the church, supposed safe places for our children. And I've just used the example in Fiji. 72% of parents, caregivers, as I said earlier, admitted using physical punishment. And at school, 75% of the key informants, teachers, and even the children themselves reported experiencing physical harm, verbal insults, both from teachers, children, and their peers. I've used this from the global school-based student health. Just for the 14 countries that we work in, the percentage of students aged 13 and 15 reporting bullying or physical fights within the previous 12 months. It's actually worrying. I just forget which country, whether it was Kiribati, where they said it's all right for husbands to beat up their wives when things go wrong. And so a lot of work for child protection to change that thinking around. And the percentage of students aged 13 and 15 who reported physical fights disaggregated by gender. No guessing who fights more, right? There's more testosterone and energy. It's usually the boys, but we don't follow far behind in the Pacific when it comes to the girls.
Did you do any comparison studies on Pacific children?
That's a really good question. No, not yet. I hope maybe if the opportunity arises, we could, because I think we were all trying to understand your no smacking. Was it a policy, a law? The law. Yes, and when I heard about that, I was really worried for Pacific Island families, because what happens at home is no different from what we do when we migrate to New Zealand or Australia. And I say this because my sister was married to an Italian. I had her son at 7 years old ring up social work and say, my mother's been beating me up. She wasn't. So they called her. I said, what did you say? I said, well, I'm a Fijian. I just held his hand very tight and I said, don't, because this and this and this can happen to you, and I'll be really sad if you got injured. But Fabrizio picked up the phone, because it's a good thing that they can do that. Picked up the phone and reported her. It worked, though. She's never touched him like that again. He's a wonderful parent with 3 children now, Fabrizio. But it's just saying how, for us in the Pacific, when we come to New Zealand, ago to Australia, and I was really worried when I heard about the anti-smacking or no smacking. Anti-smacking, yes. I was.
It's not totally it, but there are situations where you can grab children to restrain them from going across the road or from harming other children. So it's not that it is about smacking, but you can physically restrain children in certain situations. Yeah.
Well, not quite similar, but like the police say, reasonable force.
No, that's gone.
Good. I'm really glad for the police here.
Oh, the police for arrest conditions, of course, yes.
Yeah, we tend to abuse that, and
What's reasonable?
exactly.
It's like the pinch, your mom's pinch.
Yes, it's like the pinch because you come out with a wealth and nobody else but only you and your mum know. Yes, it's a difficult one. Sorry, and you'd have to ask my daughter if I will not confess to being a good parent. I will not confess that it's easy being a parent, and I wish I'd gone to parenting school before I had children. But who does go to parenting school?
Salote, how much is that embedded in our cultures? Like if you try and bring in those new parenting cultures, and then you compare it to the traditional Pacific cultures of that's how you discipline children. If we don't change the culture, it won't change. You know, if we don't work with the communities.
Well, my approach for after 7, 8 years in child protection, is my thing, because I've thought long and hard about it, is I would like my children to have those vibrant brain that is, what do you call them? Those, have you ever seen that big brain, small brain? The neglected child and the loved child? The short child who's been abused and neglected, and the taller child, same age. And for me, for a child who was brought up with a lot of smacking, with a lot of wealth, embarrassment, I still had to go to school, and who promised herself that she would never smack her children, but she did because my daughter reported me to the police. I would say I want my child to have the best brain, to realize their full potential, because it does affect, it affects the brain, the way you talk to your children, the way you discipline your children, the way you mold, nurture, and care for your children. And laws are perfect, and I always say, I don't want to let lawyers down. Laws are perfect, they're the easiest part, but how do you translate that to ensure that children will grow up in an enabling environment where they develop brains that help them to be really powerful, assertive, confident leaders? I think New Zealand has demonstrated quite a few of great examples of young leaders in this country. And your youth justice program, which I tried to mimic a lot without any laws in Fiji, your family group conferencing. I'm one of those people, even though the law is silent on it, I'll have a go and try something different, because it benefits the people that you're responding to, especially children. Your youth justice program that then translated into your rangatahi courts, your Maori courts. I think you're really famous in overseas, yeah, with your yes, your family group conference. Ah, right. Right. And my understanding, it was the Polynesian community whose children were presenting in the prisons that actually came in and asked if they could participate in the solution. And that's how the young offenders family group conferencing system was set up. And it's no different in Fiji. Also, the indigenous people overpopulate. And provide lots of employment for lawyers, for judges and magistrates, because they're always presenting challenges in court. Yeah. So, as you heard, we've had 4 coups, and I resigned in the last 4th one. I don't call myself a lawyer anymore if I'm asked in Fiji. I say I'm a child protection specialist, because lawyers can either make or break a system, because you know how to get around it. And unfortunately, some of us compromised our oaths when we participated in the 2006 coup and advised the ones that actually made things happen. And our Chief Justice was kicked out of the country, basically walked out of his office. So as a lawyer, I was emotional coming back to Dunedin in New Zealand, because I remember all the wonderful things that I learned from law school, and going back and putting back. And then within a year, the first coup happened in 2000, then 2002, and then another one in 2006. So, time to change course. But I'm just giving you just a quick snapshot of peer bullying. Fiji, we are still lucky at the moment that, what do you call it? Social networking. Those things are happening, but it hasn't gone to the extent where, correct me if I'm wrong, Tale, I think we suffered the first couple of suicides, was it 1 or 2? Because of social networking, that was really recent. Tonga and Samoa wanted to shut down their internet because of abuse on social networking. We had to try and persuade them that you can't close down business just because a few children are misusing social networking or modern technology. So we watch and try and learn from other things that are happening, but we still don't catch up as quickly as we can to prevent the harm to our children. Fiji, a lot of it is still the fist fights. But I think the social networking abuse is going to come up more. Have I gone beyond my 1 hour?
2 more minutes.
I wanted to give time to, because these are very similar to the other graphs, so I'll just leave you here with, it's the trafficking. That's a snapshot, and we can't even touch trafficking except support governments in terms of the tiering. It's going on, but we don't have the resources to patrol our shores, and we're a vast ocean. Fiji has only 2 patrol boats, Vanuatu has only 1, Nauru, I didn't see any, Tuvalu, 1. So it's really difficult to track who's coming into your country. And
taken from to go somewhere else. But the source country for women and children in sex trafficking, that people and women and children from Fiji are taken somewhere else, or they're in Fiji?
We've had a couple of domestic trafficking within Fiji too, but also it's usually the boats that are coming in. Yes, and sometimes if they're not reported, we don't find them again. We hope that they've gone somewhere, found a good life, but because our birth registration system is also challenged, it's very difficult to track our children. And that's the case also for Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, where we're trying to improve their systems so that they can keep track of their children. We talked about child marriage. I won't say too much on that one anymore, but for a long time it's always girls marry at 16, boys marry at 18. My understanding was biological developments are different. A 16-year-old is ready at a girl, but boys mature a little bit later. I'll leave it at that, but I'm not a scientist, so I won't go into that. And just our child protection law, we still have those from Cook Islands since the 1968. Some of you, you were just stars in the eyes of your parents. Yes, 1968, you weren't even around. 1974, Fiji's Juvenile Act. We're working on making sure that that's more up to date. Children and young people in Kiribati. Kiribati is one of the countries, they're so small, 110,000, but they're really quick on making things happen. And they've been our star country in terms of child protection law, youth justice law, and family protection law. And Tokelau, Tonga, Vanuatu, there's none, and Tuvalu, they're under draft at the moment. Well, Korabwa, as they would say in Kiribati, me taki vinaka danyavad, fafatai lava, and thank you very much for listening. I don't think I left any time for you to ask me those really good, hard questions. Before I go, can I reiterate my invite? We'd really like to see a lot more from New Zealand coming through, especially Pacific Island students. You don't have to lose your PR, you don't have to lose your citizenship, but come over and explore the Pacific and help us with child protection. Thank you.
We'll just put it down. So firstly, I'd just like to thank Salote. Thank you so much for your lecture, for taking your time out to come all the way over here and enlighten us on all the multifaceted issues that you face. It's inspiring to see that you can still have a smile that lights up a room, even after all of those issues and all of the challenges that you face. Also to the law faculty, thank you so much. Without a lot of your admin work, we wouldn't be able to hold these lectures. Gully as well, who is our chief sponsor for this event. Their support is just unparalleled and absolutely amazing. And for all of you guys here, thank you so much for coming to this lecture. It really means a lot to all of us. And I think we just have a little gift from the faculty.
We have access luggage. Thank you.